All right, welcome to the All In podcast. We have Jose Hernandez here. He's a former baseball player, an entrepreneur, and the millennial money mentor. How's it going?
Hey, Natalie, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Could you just briefly walk through what you're doing now before we kind of go all the way back to your childhood?
Yeah, definitely. So my main business right now is I run a online financial education platform called Finance University, designed to teach people the ins and outs of personal finance, investing, creating long-term wealth, and just helping them understand how to really manage their money. The point of that was to create something that people could use to learn these subjects that maybe they didn't learn in school or they don't have a background in finance. So it's not only easy to understand, but also easy to apply and continue to use throughout their lifetime. So also very active on social media. My main platform is Instagram, and I go by the Millennial Money Mentor on there. General mission is just to spread financial literacy, helping people understand what it takes to start building wealth and investing and managing their money and all the other things that comes with your financial journey.
Yeah, I love that. I think like finance and social media, two things that you touched on, are things that blows my mind are still not taught in school because
Yeah.
one, we have a lot of young kids, athletes who are spending so much time on social media. It's obviously a big part of our lives and we have absolutely no education on it. And then similarly, like finance and wealth building is such a massive part of our lives that we also have no education on it. So what in your life kind of inspired you to fill that gap?
Yeah, so I am an immigrant to the United States with my family. So we came here from Venezuela, and growing up in a pretty or very actually adverse socioeconomic environment, you quickly realize how important money is in your life and what it's like to go without it. And a lot of things that I went through growing up, they built some character in me, but when I got older and was lucky enough to go to school, thanks to baseball, I chose finance because it was something that I could manage as a student athlete, but also something that I knew was important and I knew I could do well with it in the real world if my athletic career ended. And I knew that it was something I could help other people with. So after my baseball career ended, I started working as a financial advisor for a pretty large investment advisory firm and got some real world experience and did the work and just decided that I wanted to do it at a much larger scale and start sharing it with people that probably haven't been investing their whole lives and they're younger or they just don't know these things. So I felt that tug and decided to go all in on it. And I'm glad that I did.
Awesome. No, I love that. And I'm glad that you did too, because I think that education is so needed in this world. And so it's great to hear that you're filling that gap now. Now I want to go like back to the beginning because I'm also from Venezuela, which I think none of my listeners probably know that. And well, my mom is from Venezuela, I should say. Right. I've been once, but yeah, like it's a crazy place and people don't understand what's going on there. Could you go back to your childhood and kind of explain what living or growing up in Venezuela is like?
Yeah, so I didn't spend too much time there. I grew up in Central Florida, but I came to the United States when I was about 4 or 5. So I remember a little bit of it, but we were lucky enough to get out before it was really starting to deteriorate. It's sad because Venezuela actually has a good economic history. They're an OPEC country. They produce petroleum, and in the past, it's been a very good business to be in. But with the change in the government going basically communist, it's unfortunate how it's happened and what it's done to the people. And really, there's no reason why Venezuela should be in the place it's in right now. But I still have family there that I talk to from time to time, and it's just very real how bad it is. And it gives me a lot of perspective about how good we have it over here. And the fact that you have opportunities here, whether you come from money or not, down there, it doesn't really matter. It's like, it is what it is. And I think that all of us should have some perspective if we live in a country like the US or Canada that has opportunity that, it's harder for some than others. And I think I can attest to that, but there's still a chance.
Yeah, that opportunity is just like, that's something I'm grateful for every day. Like I journal with my gratitude journal. I'm like, just opportunity is a word that comes up a lot. And I think we do take it for granted here in North America, in Canada and you in the US, when we do look, in perspective, that helps us because just so crazy. Like, for example, right now, I think you have to basically like bribe the police to get gas.
Yeah.
And they were like a major producer. I
Yeah.
remember when I was 13 and I went there, and I'm 27 now, there like gas was cheaper than water.
Yeah.
And it's just so mind blowing. And I think I saw a picture the other day of someone who was there. They had like so many bolivars on their desk, and it all equaled up to like $50 US. Like, imagine
Yeah.
carrying around like,
It's crazy. The
like,
inflation is so bad.
it's just it's absolutely mind blowing. So I do think like for you growing up somewhere like that probably gave you some great perspective as you've spoken on. And for me, just as well, like we have a lot of family back there. My grandma finally came up here,
Yeah.
but just hearing about these things, it does help you like have a reality check in a sense.
Definitely. 100%.
So I want to go back. So you moved to, I think you said before, like you told me offline that you moved to Puerto Rico, correct? And
Yeah.
then Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't spend too much time in Puerto Rico, but that's actually where my parents met. So father's Venezuelan, my mother's Cuban. They actually both lived in Venezuela, but they met in Puerto Rico. It's kind of a funny story, but that's where they met. And my father was a pilot. So he flew airplanes, and he was based out of Puerto Rico. But we eventually moved to Puerto Rico, spent a year or two there. My younger brother was born in Puerto Rico, and my dad was just getting things together to help us move to the U.S. So I came over as a resident, and my mother did too. My brother was born in Puerto Rico, so he had citizenship automatically. And my father had gotten his citizenship through being naturalized. So from Venezuela to Puerto Rico, and then Central Florida, where I spent the majority or all my childhood before moving up to Georgia.
Yeah, and Florida is a big kind of baseball place, essentially. So, and Venezuela is as well, although there's the war of baseball and soccer for sure. So how did you get into baseball?
Yeah, well, definitely the culture, right? And like you said, baseball is huge in Venezuela. And it's funny because it kind of stands out. South America is more about soccer.
Yeah.
We have some decent soccer players too, but yeah, it's just baseball is the thing. And my dad really from as young as I could remember was I don't want to say pushing baseball on me, but kind of pushing baseball on me. But that's how we got started, in the front yard, just learning how to hit and throw and play catch, excuse me. And just continued to play ball throughout my childhood. And when I got to high school, I realized that was going to be my opportunity to go to college, right? Because my parents weren't going to be able to pay for it. And I worked extremely hard at it, and was lucky enough to land an opportunity to play collegiate baseball, and then get educated thanks to the sport. So it's definitely a big part of my life, and there's a lot of things that baseball has shown me that I've been able to transition into the business world and the real world that I'm extremely grateful for.
Yeah. What position did you play?
I was a catcher.
Oh yeah. I actually used to play boys baseball when I grew up. And I would pitch and catch. And the amount of time that you spend just squatting alone. Oh my gosh. Like, people don't even realize how hard being a catcher is, especially I think as you get older, like when you're younger, like you see little kids and they sit in that squat position like naturally. But when you're older, like even now, I'm like, oh, my hip, like it hurts. And I see players in the MLB and I'm like, how are they still like that mobile?
It's a tough spot. It's definitely very physical, and the more advanced you get in the game, you're involved in more plays, and there's more pressure involved with it. And you have to make sure that the ball doesn't get behind you. You have to drop down and block pitches in the dirt, and there's a lot that comes with it. But I think it's funny because it's a good position that teaches you leadership too, because you're basically in every play, you're working with the pitcher, who is basically the most important player on the field. So definitely a tough position, but it teaches you a lot. And I think there's only certain types of people that can do the job.
Yeah. So was your goal to go pro, or was it just to kind of, did you have to make that transition or decision of like, maybe I'm not going pro, I'm going to focus more on school?
Yeah. So I always say, like, the only thing I really ever wanted out of life was to play baseball. That's really, really all I ever wanted. I mean, it was always my dream as a kid to play Major League Baseball. And I always joke around and say I went to college to play baseball and happened to study finance along the way. But when I was in school, I worked hard to line up opportunities for myself if my career didn't continue, which ended up being the case. But Yeah. I mean, one thing about my career that I look back on is I always said that I never wanted to look back and say, I wish I didn't, or I wish I worked harder. And that's definitely not the case. I gave baseball everything I could. And that's a lot of people that played baseball with me. They'll always say like, dang, Jose is the hardest working guy I ever met. And some of that's definitely transitioned into what I do. But I think that what I look back on the most, I don't want to say with regret, but I wish I maybe did a little bit differently, was maybe addressed some of the mental health challenges that I had to work through and didn't work through until later after my career. And I just, you look back and wonder, what if I had addressed those things when I was still an athlete? Because I was the classic case of extremely physically talented guy, just could really catch and throw, could really hit for power from the left hand side of the plate. A lot of good things that you would want in, an athlete. And the thing that just really held me back constantly was up here, right? And that's what I look back with. I don't want to say the most regret, but maybe the most frustration, because I really wish it was the case where, someone told me, hey man, you got to stop playing because you're just not talented enough. I'm not saying that I was going to be a first round or anything like that, but a lot of people were kind of surprised when my career ended. And, it was just because I was physically talented. I worked extremely hard to become that physically talented, but, I really struggled mentally. And I think a lot of that had to do with the pressure I felt because I made an identity out of being a baseball player. That was all I saw myself as. And, the relationship with my father was very one-dimensional for the most part. Love my dad, nothing against him, but I think a lot of Latino baseball players can attest to this. There's a lot that goes into it, and he's always talking about, this is our culture, this is our blood, this is who we are, this is what we do. So you have that pressure, and then I had the pressure of, one of my biggest motivations in life is to help my parents financially. I was like, man, the big leagues are going to help me do that, and a lot of the anxiety that I had to work through was developed in my childhood because of the environment that I grew up in and all the pressure and the stress and all that. So I didn't start unboxing and unpacking all this until after, because I got to the point where I needed to get some help for my mental health. I just wish I look back, and when I look back, I wish I'd just maybe talk to somebody when I was 18, right? Not when I was 23 and it was already over with. That's the thing I look back on my career with. Again, not the most regret, but just the biggest what if. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that feel that same way, but I guess it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate your vulnerability of sharing that, because I relate deeply. Like, that's very similar to my story. When I left, I was still part of the national team. Yeah. Ultimately, like I missed the 2014 Olympics, but I was super young. 2018 was more my trajectory, but I walked away in 2015, and there was a lot of questions and what ifs from my teammates. And one of my teammates ended up winning silver at the 2018 Olympics, and we were kind of at the same level back then. And so it is hard, I think, with those mental health things, because if you tear your ACL and it's never going to get back, it's very visible and easy to be like, hey, this is changing me, I can't, ever get back. But with mental health, it is such a what if, and you just don't know, like, did I experience more of this mental health once I walked away, or was it because of the mental health that then I had to walk away? If I would have changed it, would I've been able to last longer? And I think that is something that people who might not have gone through that, or just look from an external perspective, don't really understand, because it isn't as visible as, a physical injury.
Yeah, I know. It's so true. The thing that I struggle with the most, and I know there's plenty of people that probably struggle with this too, is I had a very, very good arm, right? As very, very, professional caliber type arm from behind the plate. But I struggled with the short throw to the mound. And it's, again, very frustrating, because it wasn't like, I couldn't hit a curveball, or, I just didn't have the arm talent, or I wasn't good at receiving. It was just like something that is so small. And it really hindered me in high school, and in junior college, I lost a year to it. and I lost a year to it when I was playing Division I baseball, and I was kind of shaky with it my senior year in college. And, scouts see that and they're kind of just like, I don't know, so all that I think was just like the culmination of all this pressure and just the general anxiety that I was having to work with just off the field. And, I'm glad that I didn't walk away from the game early, because, man, there's so many times that I wanted to. And it's unfortunate, because I've talked to so many people that have gone through the same thing, pitchers, catchers, infielders, whatever. But yeah, it's just like the mental side is what really killed me. And, I don't know. I did a lot of different things to try to work through it. I would get through it sometimes and, I'd be able to play a season, but then it'd come back another season out of nowhere. And it's, I don't know. It's like, there's no real way to explain it other than it's just extremely frustrating at the time.
Yeah. I think as athletes, like, we can be our own big, like, worst critics, and that internalized pressure, like, you hear sometimes of athletes talking about, well, my parents or my coaches, they forced me to do this. But often it's like, it's yourself, right? It's like that culture that you've built in yourself, in your own mind, of like, I have to make it for my family, for like, I've invested decades into that. And sometimes, like, it's that just doesn't allow you to just go out there and like have fun and play without the nerves.
Yeah. And I really wish I had found a way to do that, because it was almost like, I don't even know how to explain it other than like, I was just like playing with like a parachute behind me. It's like my full ability never really I was never in flow state, right? We talk about flow state and being a high performer in anything. I was never in flow state because of just like this constant anxiety that I was having to deal with, like on the field. Of course I was the classic extremely good guy in like a combine or, showcases or whatever. But it was just, that's exactly how I'd describe it. It's like running with a parachute behind you, where, you can still see the ability. I was still able to be somehow good enough to play Division I baseball on scholarship, but that the mental side just held me back so much.
Yeah. Did you guys have like sports psychologists? Because I know now, like, baseball seems to be taking a big prioritization in a sense of bringing in a lot of sports psychologists. They've seen how important it is. I think, baseball is kind of 99% mental.
It is. Definitely.
But I think back then, like, even I know, like, I think we're the same age, and back then it wasn't as prioritized. Like, it's made leaps and bounds over the last 3-4 years of how much they prioritize the mental side of training. So what was your experience with that?
We didn't really have anything like that. I considered it kind of, but it's such a, like I said, it's such a weird thing, because there's nothing really a coach can tell you. It's like, other than just like, make the throw, right? That's like, it's not something that you should have to coach. I wish it was something that you could coach, because I would have worked extremely hard at it, but it just wasn't. And, the help that I should have gotten was, finally talking to somebody. And that was after my athletic career ended, and, my life was really kind of taking a downward spiral at that point in time. Not only because of the challenges I already had, but all this, my career just suddenly ending, and just kind of just, I guess you can call it like an ego death that, that was hard to deal with at the time. But I wish, even if it wasn't a sports psychologist, I wish I just had the conversation at 18, because I think that it wasn't, definitely because of baseball, but all these other things that contribute to, anxiety and depression and all these other things that some of us have to work through, and it just kind of manifested on the field.
Yeah, that's the interesting point. I think, as being a full-time athlete, that's basically, even as a student athlete, like, you're spending most of your time on the field. And so that's where you see the issue. And so you think it's a sport issue, but you don't realize there could be this underlying issue. And then I think when you walk away from the sport, you realize, oh, now you're not spending all day on the field. This is showing up in other ways, and you're realizing, wow, it wasn't just a sport issue. And I think that does leave the biggest question of what if, because you thought maybe it was a sport issue, and all of a sudden you realize, no, it could have been this underlying issue that maybe I could have sought help for earlier. Yeah.
And I'll just say, I am glad I eventually got help, because I needed it, and it's better to get it late than never. So I'm still a big advocate for people that maybe they transition away from the game and they feel like, oh, well, it's too late now. Like, whatever. Like, I would urge you to maybe reframe that thinking a little bit. I got to the point where I absolutely needed to get some help, and I'm glad that she's my girlfriend, my fiance now at the time. She was basically forcing me to go get some help, and I'm glad that I did, because my life was basically falling apart. I made the transition over to the professional world. I was, a part of a very large investment advisory firm. And in my mind, that was like, okay, well, I didn't play Major League Baseball. This is the closest thing to it. And, coming from where I come from, like, no one in my family's worked in finance. My parents really don't speak English. They don't know the difference between a stock or a bond. So it's like this massive, massive opportunity for someone that comes from very little. So I was like, man, I'm just going to run with this. And in honesty, I was using it to fill a void. And I was really, really struggling there. I was doing very well. I was performing at a high level, and, I was dealing with the things I was dealing with, but I had to take a step back at one point in time when my mental health was stabilizing a little bit, and realize, man, we're just using this as a way to fill a void in our life that's been there for a couple of years now. And, I'm glad that I came to that realization, because it's what helped me become clear-minded enough to decide to, start what I'm doing now on social media. But yeah, that was a very, very painful period of time in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. And that takes such maturity to realize that you're using this, kind of fill a void. Did those things like manifest in your life, those mental health issues immediately after you walked away from the sport? Or did it kind of like, I guess in my perspective, or in my experience, mine was like, it was really low. I seeked a lot of help, but then for example, I competed in CrossFit. And so that was kind of like my crutch, in a sense, that filled the void until the last year and a half or so, when the pandemic has happened. I had a shoulder injury, and I realized this is the first time I've ever not competed in anything. And I thought, like I was using my business, my CrossFit as this void. So I thought that I'd healed these other parts, but not necessarily those. So I'm curious to know if like you seeked help right away, or was it kind of like after you were doing the corporate thing for a couple of years? Yeah,
I appreciate you asking that. So it was weird. So one of my best friends, he ended up going to the Mariners in the first round my senior year, and his agent was pretty nice, and, kind of was keeping me on the loop, because I did have people that were interested in me, and organizations that were interested in me. But, he's got, you might be kind of like a day 2 or 3 type of call type of thing. So just stay by the phone. And I did, I watched the entire draft, the day 2, day 3, they had, I don't know if they still do it or not, but they had like this draft updater thing on Twitter, and it's like name by name by name by name by name. And, of course my dad's watching it. And, when day 3 passed and the last pick went through, my name wasn't called. It was tough. And honestly, my dad took it harder than I did, which I did not feel good about at the time. It was a mix of different types of things. It was, number one, like, you don't deserve to be upset. Like, I'm the one that was, putting in the work and all the hours and the bus rides and the adversity that comes with being, a baseball player, and, me dealing with these challenges on my own, I felt like. So I really had like some resentment towards him for that a little bit. But I also felt guilty, because like, he was definitely living his life through me. And, again, a lot of that just comes down to our culture, right? I have a son that plays baseball at the high level, like, so he had it rough, and, baseball is still a really sensitive topic for us, even if it's been like 5 years now, which is crazy. But at first, like, it sucked. That day was a bad day for me, but it was almost kind of weird, because like at the same time, it felt like a weight had been lifted off of my shoulders, because there was just always this constant pressure to just walk away from the game, because, it's like, I don't know how else to describe it, but it's like, you're really good at something, but there's this minute thing that's like not even really a part of the game, stops you from being as good as you can be at it. And that just eats at you. It's the only thing that you think about at night before you go to bed. And like, thinking about like, man, I have to catch some bullpens. I hope there's no one like behind the pitcher. And like, these things eat at you. And I really felt like I had a weight lifted off my shoulders, and I felt terrible for it at the time, but I could just like take a deep breath and just be like, man, all right, well, at least we don't have to worry about that. And it was okay for about a month or two, but then, the reality of it started setting in that, I was no longer a baseball player, and, all the routines of like going to the field and practicing and, hitting the base in the cages and all the other things wasn't there anymore. So I had one more semester of school, and I finished that out, and I was really starting to struggle at that point in time. And, it was a really bad place. And I was lucky enough to line up that opportunity with the firm. So kind of was just, trying to deal with it at that point in time, but I just, kept getting worse and worse and worse. And, my girlfriend, who's my fiance now, she was just telling me like, you need to get some help. This is bad. And, I went and got the help, and, basically the first meeting, and I'm actually meeting with him after this call today, but, he's like, yeah, man, you have some major depressive disorder. Like, you're extremely depressed right now. Like, this is a serious issue, and we need to talk about this. And, I didn't really know how to deal with it. I knew I was like depressed, I guess, but, maybe going back to the culture thing, in Latino culture, we don't really talk about mental health, right? It's like, you need to be a man. You need to man up. You need to, do all these things that we consider manhood. And never in my life had I talked to anyone about my mental health. I just thought I was being soft the entire time. The whole baseball thing, struggling with the throw of the mound. Like, I thought I was just being soft. I was like, man, how can you not do this? Like, and all the anxiety I felt, I thought it was just weakness. Right. I'm glad now that I'm an adult and can see things in hindsight. I understand that was not the case. In fact, I think is a sign of mental toughness that I did not walk away from the game as many times as I wanted to because of this thing. I gave it 100%, and I never stopped working hard. But, it was a lot to deal with. And I had to, I'm glad that my doctor, really helped educate me on what, mental health really is, because, I, at the time, really just didn't think of it other than just like, like I said, you're being weak, you're being soft. But he educated me on understanding that there's a lot of things that go into this. There's the environment you grew up in. I grew up in not a great one. I'm thankful for my parents and everything that they did, and will always, very, very appreciative of that. But, when you grow up in poverty, there's a lot of things that you go through as a kid that suck, and stay with you for life. And I still have to unpack and work through a lot of those things. And there's the genetic side of it, right? Which I didn't even know was a thing. Some of these things are passed down. And, now that I see my parents, I can understand a little bit better. Maybe I see some things that they struggle with and they don't even know. So there's that part of it. And then, there's the things that happen to you in life as well, and how you unpack those and everything that play a role. So when we talk about chemical imbalances or whatever you want to call them, that's what's happening, but you have to understand why. And I didn't understand why. I just thought like, man, I'm just, I'm worthless. I'm not good, whatever. So it took that, and, I actually got on medication too, which I'm glad I did at the time, because I needed it. I mean, I know there's a lot of debate around the subject, and I was very hesitant to do it because I'm like, well, I'm just going to use this as a crutch. Like, this is more confirmation that I'm just being weak. But I was in a very bad place in my life. It was like the lowest point in my life ever. And, I don't want to be dark. I just don't know if I didn't get help. I don't know what would happen. Right. So I'm glad I got the help. And I was on the medication for a couple of years when I was with Merrill Lynch, the firm I was with, and being an advisor in very high pressure environment. But at least I could operate, right? Because I was a mess before. Like I had problems talking to people, because of the anxiety, I'd just like be shaking on the inside, just even thinking about a conversation with someone, which was weird because I was never really that way. And I'm not super extroverted, but I've always been good about speaking to people and presenting myself well. But I just was struggling really bad with that on top of the anxiety, and depression and anxiety can really play off of each other. So it was just a combination of those two things. And I was in this new environment, and, the wealth management industry, you have to be sharp all the time. And, it can be actually a very toxic environment too, which is a part of the reason why I walked away. But again, I could at least operate. So, I could operate at a high level and do the things I had to do. And then, when I got home, just deal with it. And that's when I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, what are we doing here? Are we living a happy life? And the answer was really no. I mean, anything you're going to do that has a lot of upsides can be hard. So it wasn't that, but I had to look at some of the people that were a couple years ahead of me in the industry, and I had to look at like their lives and whether they're happy or not, and whether I saw myself being happy being that way. And, that's kind of where I started feeling like this weird kind of tug to do something else that's much more difficult and, requires more of me. So yeah, I don't even remember the original question, but yeah, I do now. But yeah, it did come on gradually, and then all of a sudden at once, and I needed to step in and do something about it.
Well, I really appreciate your openness to talk about it, and especially openness about talking about medication, because I do think there is still a taboo even within, like, people are trying to break the stigma about talking about mental health, but there still is that stigma about medication. And something I try to talk about, and I should probably talk about more, because I also took medication. It's been maybe 2 years that I've been off of it, but it was similar. My first experience was I didn't want to. So I worked with my therapist. I said, no, like I haven't heard good things. You hear those things, right? I actually ended up spending all my money and going to Bali and just going on a solo trip. I felt amazing. Like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Then I came back, and you're back in that same environment. Yeah. And nothing has changed. Like, you spent a month away, but you come right back. And after a few months, all of a sudden I realized even the meditation I learned, all these things that I did, it was still just super heavy. And you start to accept that it is a chemical imbalance. It's not like just this thing that, like I just decide I don't have anymore. It just doesn't necessarily work that way. And so I know some people haven't had great experiences on medication, but I personally did have, it was really helpful for a few years.
Yeah. So on that subject, I don't know. I just, growing up, I was the type of person that I really cared about what other people thought. Like, I always just wanted to make sure like that I didn't make people upset, I was just kind of typical trying to just be a good person, and that type of thing is good. But I carried that throughout my entire athletic career, and wanted to make sure my dad was happy with me about how I was playing, and making sure that I was looking good for scouts and all this other thing. And when I got to the firm I was with, there were some people that definitely stuck their neck out for me to even have an opportunity to have an interview there. So I felt responsible to make sure that I made them look good. So all this pressure, right? And the interesting thing about me deciding to walk away from that was it was an important moment in my life, because it felt like the first time that I had kind of just like made a decision for myself and say, I'm going to care less about what other people think about me, and I'm going to make a decision that I feel good about for myself. And I made the decision to leave the firm mainly because they didn't allow me to post on social media. Long story short, Wall Street compliance is very strict, and I decided I wanted to start doing the social media thing. And like literally the next day, someone found out about it. I got a call. They brought me to the office, basically gave me an ultimatum, which way are you going to go? Because you can't do that here. And I was just like, no, I'm just going to, I appreciate the opportunity. I know this is once in a lifetime. Statistically, I have no reason to be in this seat, but I'm going to go do this other thing. And it was just really symbolic of like where I was in my life, I guess. And I probably should have been a little bit better about it, but I also decided to get off the medication at that point in time. And like I said, I probably should have talked to my doctor a little bit more about how I went about it, because the withdrawals were very bad. I remember I really, really struggled with the withdrawals from the medication, the nausea, like the zapping kind of feeling.
The zapping, no one understands that.
The kind of like weird shocks that you feel. And then like, you kind of like, I forgot. I can't really describe it. Kind of like how you feel like you're there for 1 second, but you're not. Kind of like I don't know how to explain it, but I struggled with that a lot. But like it was a weird time in my life, and a lot of people I think were like wondering, like, is he okay? Like, why are you going to walk away from this like golden opportunity, once in a lifetime opportunity, and do these other things? Like, that someone that does that's probably not well. But I just decided to say, screw it, I'm going to do it. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sorry if I make anyone upset about this decision, but I feel like this is something that I'm much more compelled to do, and something that I feel like I can help a lot more people with, and, be a lot more proud of. And I did it. And I think that goes to say, yes, if you're going to get off the medication, I think you should maybe talk to your doctor a little bit more about how you're going to do it. You should probably wean yourself off of it. But yeah, I was just like kind of in a split decision. I'm leaving this company, I'm getting off this medication, and I'm doing this other thing. So yeah, looking back on it, it's crazy, but yeah, that's exactly how that happened.
Well, it's awesome you've made that transition, and especially walking away. Like anyone I've heard who's walked away from that level of corporate type thing, it's hard, because it is true. Like it's kind of like a one in a million spot, like to get into that in the first place. And you think, society puts pressure of like, you should be happy just to be here. So it kind of goes counterculture. But I also appreciate you sharing about that withdrawal, because I haven't heard anyone else talk about it like that, but I had the exact same experience, where I was actually experiencing this weird thing with the medication that was interacting with I had a bronchitis. So I got given an antibiotic, but from a different doctor than my normal. So she didn't really like think about the consequences. And so then I just stopped taking my medication. It was in between two major CrossFit events. And people keep asking me like, why that was your biggest CrossFit event ever, and you like just weren't physically, prepared. And I said, well, I couldn't train. I had to have my boyfriend drive me around for weeks. I couldn't even go to the gym because I was getting the zaps. I thought I was going to faint. Yeah, it is absolutely crazy. So as open as we've been about medication, and you've been about that story, I think it is true. People should make sure they check in with their doctors, because maybe just use our stories as a warning about that. As definitely go to the doctor for if
sure.
you're going on or going off.
Yeah, 100%.
So do you find that your transition, when you transitioned from sport, maybe made it easier to then make that similar decision to transition away from corporate, because you left something that you've done for so long? It almost makes it easier to be like, hey, I'm a free person. I can make my own decisions. Definitely. Because I realized what I was doing was filling a void. So that made sense. And then I didn't really make I was getting there. I felt myself getting there, but I didn't make my identity out of being a financial advisor for this company, which was my intent in the beginning. It's like, well, I'm just going to be a financial advisor for this company for the rest of my life and make millions of dollars, and that's it. But it was definitely easier, and because I didn't have the same type of pressure culturally, I guess, from my parents. Like, I told my parents that I was leaving, and they're just like, really? Like, okay. All right. And I say it jokingly, but like, I feel, it's kind of dark, but I say it jokingly because that's how I deal with it. But I feel like, man, there's really not much more I could do to let them down more than not playing baseball anymore. So, that made it a lot easier to walk away. I still struggled with the idea of people thinking down on me. And for a couple months, I had nightmares about like, what people were saying about me. And I heard things were said about me or whatever, but it is what it is. You can't spend your entire life worrying about what other people think about you, because whether you do good or bad, people are going to have something to say, so you just got to make that realization and just do what you can to be proud of yourself and the type of person you are, because that's really all you can control. Yeah. Oh, totally true. Like you can't live your life just in expectations of other people, because ultimately it's your own head, and in your own head that you have to live with for the rest of your life. I think that people who they might feel like stuck in a job, that it's important for them to realize like there's a sense of freedom when you do make that step away from something that you thought you had to stick to for
Yeah.
life, whether it's a relationship, a job, a sport. When you do make that choice, like I feel like it's a weight off your shoulders that you can make
Yeah.
those choices again. Like, for example, I don't know if you feel like this, but if, for example, what you're doing now doesn't work, or you just decide like you don't want to do it anymore and pivot, do you feel like that would be just so much easier? Like, oh, no problem, I can just pivot.
Yeah, I think so. I think it'd be a little bit more difficult than leaving the firm because I do have so much wrapped up into it. But man, I'm telling you, there's so many times where I've just thought, man, I want to do something else. But I have a business tied to it right now, and I feel like I probably haven't done enough to where I feel like I can walk away from it. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if I see myself turning this into something else. I just happen to have a knowledge base in a specific thing that's important that I learned from real life experience that I know other people can benefit from. So that's definitely why I do it. But I'll be honest, I don't love social media that much, and I can't say that social media has made my mental health better. And especially in like the money and business and financial space on social media can be super toxic. And, you consume all that stuff and it just, I'm sure there's toxicity in every single niche in social media because that's just how social media is. It's like a way for us to try to show other people what we wish was our ideal version of ourselves, which really isn't true. So I have to keep that in mind personally. But yeah, I'm actually taking a couple of days off social media right now because, some news I got about a friend this week, and it's just been nice to be off of it because I just don't like being on it that much as I really believe in my mission and what I'm doing with it. There are days where I want to walk away from it completely or talk about something else that maybe I think is more, interesting to me. But at the same time, I think it is important to commit to things in life and, see them through. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But for right now, I'm just going to keep carving out the lane that I've carved out for myself and see where it goes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that about social media, especially from someone who has a large following and has built up
Yeah.
this business on it. Because similarly, like my business relies on social media. I
Yeah.
teach social media to athletes. And I think pretty much the first thing I start with any athlete is like the mindset around it. And it still
Yeah.
blows my mind that we don't have social media, like healthy habits taught in school, at least,
Yeah.
because a lot of these athletes, especially, I'm like, hey, like this shouldn't be taking away time from your training and from your
Yeah.
athletics and your mental health. So our brains are still wired like from the ice age. And
Yeah,
so
definitely.
for us to deal with
Absolutely.
Zoom, with social media, like all it's makes sense why those things are exhausting or trigger
Yeah.
our nervous systems in different ways
Yeah.
because we're not really used to it. We're not adapted to it. And
Yeah.
so, taking some time off or setting boundaries is important.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one thing I would like to talk about that is people talk about like escaping the rat race and all these other things that we talk about. And entrepreneurship is way too glorified on social media. Everything is romanticized on social media,
Yeah.
especially things like entrepreneurship, and social media can become a rat race too. It can be even worse. And I have to be mindful of that. And I am someone that works extremely hard at everything that I care about. And I have put a lot into social media. I put a lot into my business. My business is my business. Social media is really just an extension of the business. But yeah, I think that people need to realize that if they want to go into this thing full time, which I think there's a lot of incredible opportunities for people that are willing to stick it out and serve other people and add value. But yeah, there needs to be some talk around, how toxic it can be to be on social media full time. And not everyone out there has something nice to say about you, regardless of what type of person you are, or what your message is. Part of that's understanding human nature, I guess. But I'm in a much better place with my mental health than I was 4 years ago or whatever. But I have to really stay on top of it because I push myself extremely hard. It's just how I am. And I have extremely high expectations of myself and everything that I do. And I think I've done an okay job of it, but there have been I can think about 2 times definitely where I broke down a little bit last summer, like almost back to back because of how much pressure I was putting on myself to build this business and build this brand and put out the content and manage all this stuff and manage the financials. And it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend anyone that is in any sort of entrepreneurship, whether it's full time on the side or using social media, like check in with your mental health, because I like to think of myself as being a very mentally tough person. But I had two very ugly panic attacks last summer, back to back, and I hadn't had a panic attack before that in years. Before, I was struggling with my mental health heavily, and it really scared me. I was like, man, am I going back? Like,
Yeah.
because I thought I beat this thing. I thought I was gone. And then you go through that again and you're like, oh man, here it comes again. So I'm in a good place, and because I stay on top of it, but I just think that's important for people to know.
I totally agree. I think that is important to set those boundaries with social media, and especially knowing that entrepreneurship is romanticized on social
Yeah.
media. And until you live it, you don't realize actually how hard it is. People are
Yeah.
shouting, oh, you're going to make all this money and this. And it's not the case. It's similar to being an athlete. Like you got to grind and put in the work. And it's all those overnight, like those things that people don't see with the lights are
Yeah,
off, that then all of a sudden
definitely.
the lights are on, they see the success, but that
Yeah.
took a long time. And,
Yeah.
maybe for you, it took all the skills that you learned in baseball to then culminate into, what you're doing now and building now.
Yeah.
And hopefully in 20 years, it's even bigger than,
Yeah.
the lessons you learn now will carry forward then.
For sure.
So I want to ask one question specifically about what you do. Hopefully, give the listeners some tip. And of course, we focus a lot on mental side and and mindset. So I would love to know about the money mindset shift. I think there's a lot of talk about a money mindset, and a lot of people go from a place of lack in a sense of money, especially young athletes. Like they're scrounging for money to make their career happen any ways possible. How can they switch into a mindset where, money is flowing, their abundance, and they're open to the possibilities of making more, or the possibilities of things going right in the money side?
I really, really appreciate you asking that, because this is something I've had to work on a lot. Because again, the only thing that was talked about when it comes to money in my household growing up was there's just not enough. It's, it's one thing after another. Money is the root of all evil. And these are ideas that we need to work through and reframe in our own minds, because our beliefs, I really believe, are what shape our capability in our lives. And if you're always thinking, man, I just don't have enough money, or, I can't make money or anything like that, that's going to, the subconscious thinking is going to reflect in your results in real life. So I think that you do need to analyze, number one, how was money discussed in my household growing up? Maybe you're lucky and you came from a pretty nice background, then you don't have an issue with that. Great. But if you're not that lucky, then you have to take a step back and understand, kind of like with mental health, like there's something that this comes from somewhere. And reframing, okay, what are my current beliefs about money? Like, do I see someone that's making money and think that they're a bad person? Or do I just not see myself as someone that's capable of making a lot of money? Do I think, it's impossible to make $10,000 in a month or $20,000 a month, whatever? Those are ceilings that you're placing on yourself. So understand it takes a lot of work. And just because you start believing this stuff doesn't mean it automatically happens, but it's not going to happen if you don't reframe your thinking on it. So I'm a big believer in the idea that you should see money as a reward for service that you're providing to other people. And either the more value that you can bring at one time, or the more people that you can bring value to, that's how you can be rewarded for it. So in the sense of an athlete, right, of course, you're directly compensated by the value that you bring to your organization, whether it's your Major League Baseball club organization, or your football player, basketball player. Developing your skill set is what's going to directly impact that. But if you're in the entrepreneurial space, then deciding, okay, who is it that I'm trying to serve? What types of problems can I solve for them? How can I show them that I'm someone that can help them with their problems? And I think that's really answering these types of questions, reframing your beliefs about money. I think that's how you start working towards actually going from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset, and just understanding there's plenty of money to go around, right? There's literally unlimited amounts of money with the way that we just print money nowadays. But I think that those are all things that we have to work through. And, especially people that came up in not ideal socioeconomic environments, definitely double down on that.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. And anyone who's listening and wants to find out a lot more about money and finances and managing their own finances, whether you're an athlete, an entrepreneur, anyone, definitely go to your Instagram, which I'll put in the show notes. I have two quick questions that I'd like
Sure.
to end things off on. The first one is, what is something that you do every single day that's the biggest game changer in your life?
I am a huge believer in personal development. Like religiously every single day, I try to do something to expand my mindset, learn more about how the mind works, learn how, how the conscious mind works, the subconscious mind works, and how that translates into results in our lives. I'm a big, just love studying that because it can directly impact the quality of your life. It's like I said, your beliefs and your ideas. That's what manifests into real life. People say the word manifest with some woo around it, but that's really what happens. It's like, what do I see in my mind? And I try to tap into that vision and really hold it in my subconscious mind. It's like, what am I trying to build towards, and what type of life am I trying to create for myself? And, how much support am I trying to provide my parents, and what type of business am I trying to build? And, what type of person am I trying to become? Like, these are all things that you have to see in your mind daily, and connect with them and believe in them, especially when you're doing something that's difficult, because you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have challenges, you're going to have failures, and you always have to have that deeply rooted belief in yourself, and most importantly, the vision, because I really do believe that, the visions that you hold in your mind, that is what comes to reality, and you need to fix it, because if it's one thing one day and it's another thing the other day, you're kind of going to be lost. So I think it's good to really commit to that vision, and huge believer in taking care of myself. I stay in the weight room. That's one thing that's definitely transitioned over from my athletic career, which I'm super thankful for. And it's big for my mental health too, but I'm an extremely competitive person, especially against myself. So that's a good outlet for that. I'm always trying to get stronger, be in better shape, work on my lifts. And I think those two things are just huge for my day to day.
Love that. Awesome. And the last question is, if you were at the end of your life and you're looking back, what is the impact that you wanted to have made?
Yeah, man, that's a really good question. So right now, of course, I'm in the financial space. So I think of myself as hopefully someone that can really serve as a catalyst for people in their financial journey. So I almost think about it like I've had coaches that I can look back on in my baseball career. And like, man, because of the relationship I had with this coach, or this one little thing that he taught me, like that made such a big difference in my baseball career, whether I realized it or not at the time. So hopefully I can do that through my content, or the people that are part of Finance University and what we provide there can see that as well. Look back 5, 10, 15 years from now and be like, man, I am really glad that, I started learning these things and applying these things, because whether I realize it or not, it's really helped me get to where I'm at right now. But other than that, I think that hopefully the people that know me can look back and say, man, he is a good example of someone that can really show you that it's not really about where you come from. It's just, what type of person you are, how hard you work, how much you believe in yourself, and just really be, an example for people that probably come from an adverse kind of environment, have a not great story, have an uphill climb, and just really serve an example of you can really do whatever it is that you want, as long as you're mentally tough and believe in yourself and work through the adversity and just keep going.
Oh, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your vulnerability and your sharing throughout this entire podcast. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And we'll definitely have your Instagram and all that in the show notes so that people can check it out and learn more about what you do.
Thanks, Natalie. It's been a pleasure.